All right, my friends, build science
101.
we had to coordinate that better. If you don't know me, my name is Matt Risinger, and I've got with me
Steve Baczek.
We did this 101 series on video if you want to go back and watch the long version, but this is going to be the 30-ish minute version of the basics of building science, the 101. By the way, a quick announcement before we get started. Over at the Connect and Recharge Lounge, our three female contributors, Lydia, aka Drywall Shorty, Allie Anderson, Integra Builders out of Chicago, and Stephanie Daly, who's a builder in Utah, are doing a meet and greet over at the Connect and Recharge Lounge. So if you're interested in, if we're boring you, head over there, or if you can hear my voice, they're over the Recharge Lounge. Steve, you got Big Red ready to go for these guys?
Big Red, we're revving up, buddy.
Big Red is revving as we speak. If you guys haven't seen this before, this is a vibe board. It's kind of like a giant iPad, and it's been in use with Steve in his videos for a long time. I think between Vibe and Big Red, Steve's definitely getting known for the Vibe board. We've talked about putting them out on our job sites because they're really, really handy. Steve, you ready to kick off?
I'm ready to kick off.
Okay.
All right, well, hello, Austin. Let's talk. So, we're probably never going to stop building, right? So the question is, what do we build? We don't have those on the side there.
We don't have them on the side?
No.
All right, well, look at the main screen only then, people.
For now. So, why do we build, right? I know it's a pretty fundamental question, but you know, understanding the fundamentals is kind of gets us over halfway to the solution. So, let's talk about it. You ever actually wonder what we ask of our buildings, right? When you think about when we build a house, that house is probably going to stand for more than 100 years, likely, at least the ones that we build.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's out in the weather every day of every one of those 100 years, right? Imagine if we had to do that and withstand all the weather conditions that house is going to see.
By the way, the sides are working now, Steve, so if you draw, it'll be up.
So, control layers. It's pretty simple, right? Why we build, we want to gain control. We don't want to be out there, we want to be in here. Out there is horrible. It's either very hot in Austin
and
or
humid.
It's very cold in Minnesota in the wintertime, but it's rainy. It's just not where we want to be. What's up, buddy? So we want to gain control. We want to create the environment we want to live in, right? And to do that means get control. But what do we have to get control over, right? The four control layers: water, air, vapor, and basically temperature or thermal control, right? And they're in that order. Notice water is number one, and it's heavily highlighted. Why?
Yeah, water's number one, Steve, and we even Steve even made water the bigger and the blue writing as well. As a builder, I don't get too many calls in the middle of the night or angry emails about, hey, the temperature in this room because it's really cold out is not as comfortable as I'd like. Now they may eventually say something about that, but if I have a leak at a house, if I have a dishwasher that overflows, if I have a roof leak, if I have a window leak, it doesn't matter what time of day or night, my cell phone is going off, right? So water is absolutely number one. Go.
As an architect, we have our own language, but builders don't get off the hook that easy because they have to be able to interpret that language. And for those of you that have been in the business for any decent amount of time, you probably, like me, and have come to understand in the last 30 years, what we're building today and what I built back in 1994, 95 are worlds apart, right? Worlds apart in what we're asked to draw, worlds apart in what materials are available, worlds apart in what builders have to interpret and put together.
Well, that's for sure. Think about your 1970s car, for anybody who had a 1970s car like I did in high school, and the features that were available in your 1970s car, and also just the comfort that you demanded of a 1970s car compared to a car today. When I was growing up in Pittsburgh in the 80s, my parents didn't even have central air conditioning in my part of Pennsylvania where I grew up. And today, even people that are in Vermont and New Hampshire and Colorado put central air conditioning in because they want that temperature just so. So it's a whole different world of expectations on our houses today than even 20, 30 years ago.
Expectations of houses. We used to build that. Now we choose to build that. Right? Very low risk. Very easy to build.
Yeah.
Very high risk. Right? I live in a neighborhood, actually. It's a post-war 50s neighborhood. Every house looked exactly like that in the neighborhood. Now, most of them, including mine, look like that. Right? It's the world we live in.
It's crazy. So much has changed.
Like I said, 30 years. Used to be drawing that. Now we draw this. Mm-hmm. Or we take old houses that look like that and we turn them into new houses that now look like this.
Yep.
And of course, that 30, 40-year history has some challenges to it. That's a house that I visited. It was a potential project. We didn't take the project, but I walked around back and I said, who put the airplane terminal on the back of this house? Right? So when you look at that, you say, okay, they have something really cool going on. But the reality is, this is a pie-shaped space, and actually we put Big Red into action here.
Yeah, right? Big Red.
This is a pie-shaped space that has a 1-inch copper pipe that runs through it to heat water. That's all it is, right? I put the word setup. Someone else's thoughts, your problem. Right? And then, of course, the challenge of building. Even though I could draw it and draw it really nice, when you get out to the field, maybe it's not quite the same scenario.
The puppies, I love it. Are those one of your dogs?
Yeah. So, let's move on. Comfort and health, right? Probably the two most important things about building. I know there's a lot of people that tout energy efficiency out there, environmental responsibility, and those are all important. But the ones that, you know, the mom is concerned about when she puts the baby in that crib at night is my baby's comfort and health taken care of in my house.
Well, that's for sure.
Right? Is my family taken care of? Am I giving them the best environment I can give them? Mm-hmm. Right? Are you comfortable with this? This is my good friend Jake Bruton's, or our good friend Jake Bruton's house. Those are 16-foot sliders that make up the corner of his family room. Some people might be very afraid to put that much glass in a house. But Jake is very, very comfortable in that house. Those are triple glazed windows, and the house is tuned to the design very well. I'll take credit for designing it, but anyways, the reality is we can build this stuff, we can build it right, but we have to make the right choices. Mm-hmm. Right? Keep in mind, I'm now standing in front of those two sliders here. There's one mini split that heats that 1,000 square foot space. And that mini split is probably on the order of about 45, 50 feet away from those doors. But I'm still comfortable putting those doors in. And Jake has absolutely never had a problem and actually has very, very low energy bills in this house, that if you build to comfort and health, you get energy efficiency as a byproduct of those decisions, right? So you don't have to target energy efficiency. You just have to build a really good house that makes your clients happy, and they'll get that as a byproduct.
Steve, I think that's worth repeating because that's something I think I've had to come to over the years. Will you say that one more time? I want these guys to hear that.
Yeah, so if you build to good comfort and health issues, then you get energy efficiency as a byproduct of those decisions. It comes along for the ride, right? If I want good indoor air quality, I have to have superb air leakage because I don't want stuff being filtered through the carpet or through my walls. I want it being filtered through the filter, Imagine that. What a novel idea, huh? I put a bunch of filters in my house and actually using them to provide good air quality, right? And those of you that are building today, you've come to realize we put a lot of stuff in our houses.
Boy, do we ever.
Right? This is not a 30-year-old photograph. This is a 1-year-old photograph. And man, we love to load up stuff in our houses.
That's such a great picture, Steve.
Right? And sometimes we choose to put that stuff outside. Now, Peter Yost and I had the opportunity to go meet this. This is a builder's house. They're in Texas. I'm not going to tell you what city. And he was very, very proud of the house. And we walked up on the porch. I looked up and I started to say something, and Peter kicked me like he was my wife. And I immediately had to, okay, let's not burn this builder's dream house ideas. But understand that Peter Yost and I just came from a house. We were doing some work in an attic, and he had a thermometer with us, or a thermostat, and it registered 165 degrees in that attic, okay? And it was literally down the street. So we go here, keep that in mind. This ductwork is outside and in the attic, right? That's a choice that builder made. Rather than make the house, 200 square foot bigger and put a mechanical room in the house, he did run the ductwork on the outside. So think about it for a second, right? We cool that air, we run it down a duct at what, 60 degrees? Expecting our house to be at 70 degrees, but we immediately run that duct through a 165 degree attic. That's ludicrous, right? I don't know if you've ever heard Joe speak, but one of his favorite lines is, "Don't do stupid things."
It's really stupid, Steve. And unfortunately, incredibly common. We could drive 5 miles from this location we are today and see 50 houses under construction that have that same exact detail with ducts out of the conditioned space.
And I'll leave you with, I couldn't help myself, and I got far enough away from Peter's kicking range, and I told the builder he would have been better off if he put the unit outside the house, ran it up and across the roof. It would have performed better, because it was a hell of a lot cooler than inside the attic.
That's for sure.
Durability. One of my favorite sayings. If it don't last, it don't matter.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people out here talking about passive house, zero energy, let's do all these things. Durability is the number one thing. Because if the house doesn't last, any other decision you make, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. It doesn't make sense to put a passive house in a dumpster in 6 years.
As a side note, that picture on the top right is from a project of mine where the homeowner called me and said, I think I need some new windows on the house. And I came over with my favorite rot detection device. Unfortunately, it's not in my pocket today, but I pulled my knife out and did one of these, and it sunk all the way into the wood frames. And I was like, yeah, I think we got some problems here, I'm pretty sure. And we started taking the house apart to dig a little deeper, because I said, this is more than a window repair. Or window replacement, I should say. I suspect we got some problems on this house. And it ended up almost every window in the house had massive rot issues from a 15-year-old house, not a very old house. And that's what it looked like back there, with just some poor detailing. And this was a multi-million-dollar house in a gated community in Austin.
And there is some evidence of flashing there, but I'll call your attention to that. Zero overhangs, right? If water is the number one killer of buildings, common sense would say, don't let the building see water, right? Don't do stupid things. It's pretty much that simple.
We could probably stop our presentation right now after that one.
Yeah.
Don't do stupid things.
There you go. These are a couple houses. The top right is my first passive house that I designed. The other two were projects that I got called into for problems. This one here was being sided that day. No building paper. The windows were factory cased, slid into the opening and nailed off at the casing. Zero flashing. Now, look at the location.
Right over.
Maybe a potential problem. This house here, What if I told you that's a $45 million house?
Oh my gosh.
And that was the design solution. And it's in climate zone 5. The reason I got called in there is Glacier Alley 1, 2, 3, 4. They would build up, back up the roof. There was all kinds of brown staining here because that water would get in, it would leach through the plywood, it would take the sugars of the wood and then drain that water out on the fascia. So you can imagine someone that can build a $45 million house can probably hire a decent lawyer.
They can. I'll answer that for you, Steve. They always do.
Yeah. Why is it some buildings last?
Yeah, that's a great question. Where are those photos from, Steve?
Actually, I think this is a Norwegian church.
It looks
That's
old.
like 1200 or something like that. But notice the wood is in the ground. It's just sitting on the ground, but it's still standing, right? Because it adheres to good building science practices. Mm-hmm. It's okay if things get wet as long as they have the ability to dry. It's when we break down that ability to dry, things get wet and stay wet. Mm-hmm. Staying wet is a problem.
Yep.
Right? And of course, this one here, this is a great example. It's stone, it's going to last forever, but one of the problems with this is while it's an exemplary building science example, it is probably not the best example of energy efficiency. Mm-hmm. Right? So how do we merge those two together is pretty much what we're in search of, right? This is a project of a passive house that we did. And at some point, right, you have to ask the question, when is the house done? And I'm not talking about done like, hey, the homeowners have to move in. But in this case here, all of the windows are installed, the roof is installed, all the proper flashings are installed, the weather resistive barrier is fully intact. You could go to this house with a fire hose, and we didn't use a fire hose, but we used a regular garden hose the house down, and it was successful, right? So from a building science perspective and from a water perspective, this house is done. Everything that we do beyond this point is simply makeup to make the house look pretty. But at some point, you have to be able to say the house is done and ready for the challenges that I showed you in that first slide. Money can't buy you happiness in the building science world.
It's true.
All right, I got called in. I have a builder friend in the Boston area that occasionally calls me in. So he called me in on this one and said, Steve, I don't quite understand what the problem is, but I know there's a problem. It's a $35 million house. Again, they probably have a lawyer or two. And you could see the initial drawing by the architect had a precast plank onto a concrete masonry unit wall. Well, the problem with that is there's no thermal breaks. These are areas of very high risk for condensation.
Yep.
Right? And while it might not fail in every room, if that's a bathroom condition or if that's a kitchen condition where you have elevated moisture content in the air, that certainly becomes a major problem. Mm-hmm. Right? So the solution was we thermally break the whole system on the outside. Now, when it comes to condensation, understand it's the difference of 1 degree, right? When you look on the psychometric chart, it doesn't take a lot to go from vapor to liquid water, right? 1 degree. So while this might not be the best performer for insulation, we elevated that temperature enough to get us out of that risk of condensation. Environmental responsibility and energy. Passive house and net zero. This was a passive house that we did. Notice when we started out, we knew we were going to move to zero energy, but the client didn't have the money. So we just simply prepared for it. Underneath that in the attic are a couple conduits that go down to the mechanical room. So we can drop whatever wires and advance the house to zero energy whenever we wanted. But we had to be prepared for it. And you can see here that we actually have all of the PV panels are up there, and it's now performing at a level of zero energy. It's actually sending more energy back into the system.
Amazing.
You've been to this house.
Dan Roy's house.
Dan Roy's
We shot
house.
some videos there a while back.
We did.
It's quite a house.
We got a bunch of videos with Matt. This was a passive house that we then took to zero energy. Quick thing about Dan. Dan's a retired engineer. I know pretty much every measurement in this house. He has every circuit being measured, what's the most draw on his electrical panel, temperatures, relative humidity. He has a log on this house that's unbelievable. But the thing to understand here, our air leakage, 0.45, you can see here our R values. Now this was somewhat in Passive House's infancy, so they've fine-tuned their calculation metrics since then. So we could probably get away with maybe about 75% of these R values if we were to rebuild that house today. But given that day and that time, that's what was required. Now, one of the interesting things about this house that we ran, we used the European window, Macro-Win. It was an aluminum-clad wood-framed window on there, and we actually ran the numbers against using a domestic window and a traditional heating system. So the domestic windows were probably somewhere on the order of about 35K, 38K for this house. The Macro-Wins were up around 55K. But the traditional heating system was also in the low 30s. So if we couple the heating system with the windows, and the windows were primarily driving the performance of the HVAC system, right? So we total on the domestic side and traditional side, probably somewhere in like a 65, 70K range. The Macro-Win windows, giving us that elevated U value, was able to push that HVAC number down to where we put one mini split in the house to the tune of about $8,500.
Wow.
So we bought more windows, but the price of our HVAC came significantly lower. So he got a better performing window, better performing house for less money, right? So it's not always about the components. It's, you know, as a builder and as the architect, we're in charge of making up the recipe, but, you know, it's about what we're putting in the oven and what we're baking, not so much about all of the little pieces, right? So as professionals, we have to understand, what do all these things mean? We have to start thinking a little differently, looking at things in a slightly different light, in that not everything costs more. It's about the perspective and the way you're looking at that calculation. Because if you just simply looked at Macro-Win windows, you'd say, oh, I'm not gonna buy those. Those are almost $60,000. I can get windows for 38. But the minute I couple it with what that window drives, it becomes a totally different calculation.
Such a great example, Steve.
And I tell people we don't have to run through the numbers. I will very gladly send you this slide if you want. But when we took Dan Roy's house to zero energy, the reality is Dan Roy has the very best retirement plan in America, right? Because at the end of 10 years, Dan Roy accrued about $23,000 from the utility company after his whole PV system was bought and paid for. And he lives in Passive House quality house. It's the best air quality that he knows, to the that he doesn't even want to leave his house. And you've been in it. I mean, every time I go in there, I'm like, this is a pretty nice space to
It's
be
incredible, for sure. I think that's an interesting side note, but in building my own house for my family that I just moved into a couple years ago now, you know, I built really good houses for other people, but never lived in one. I lived in a 70s remodel for all these years, and I've got a daughter that has asthma, and I can tell you my new house is a whole different world. My daughter hasn't used her inhaler since we moved to our new house, and the indoor air quality with having an ERV that's constantly putting in some fresh air to my bedrooms all night long while I sleep, my walls that are really airtight and well insulated, it's a whole different world. So I would absolutely recommend for you as builders and architects, tradespeople, consider your own houses as your testing ground in some respects, because when you've really lived with the quality of these houses, boy, does it changes your perspective on things quite a bit.
Yeah. And when I was talking about the best retirement plan in America, I certainly wasn't lying, because not only since they put this car on the road and drive 14,000 miles, Dan has a second electrical car that he runs off of his house. And in the calculations before, one of the things I should have mentioned was he defers and pays for his sister-in-law's energy bill. In Massachusetts, if you make more than you use, you can defer some of that monies to pay somebody else's bill that's on the same grid as you. This is just a really simple drawing that we have to submit to Passive House. We have to talk about our thermal plans, our air leakage, what our air barriers are. But I think it's a really great drawing in a sense that it kind of explains the performance side of drawings, right? We're used to looking at drawings and looking at 2x4s, 2x6s, LVLs, roof trusses. But to look at a drawing and actually say, oh, so that's where my air barrier is. That's how I'm maintaining continuity around that half of the house. That stuff is just as important, if not more important, than understanding where the 2x4s are. Using design to solve a problem. Notice that we're slightly two different slopes there. It's a somewhat contemporary house, but the intent there was to create a PV field, because we knew that eventually this passive house would become also a zero energy house. And if we did a straight gable, we would have not had enough room on that roof. So as a design, we slid that roof ridge off to the left. It created a much longer slope, and hence we could put the PV on there and solve the problem. I think this one took something like 4 or 5 years. 7 kW operates the whole house, zero energy plus on this house, right? They're very frugal homeowners, right? They go to bed at 8:30, kids, everything, place shuts down. But the reality is we can do this stuff. We could do this stuff pretty darn easy. It's about the choices that we make. Yeah, so there's the numbers, right? 5 years, net metering, he gets about $400 a year back. Not a lot of money, but he's not paying anything, mind you.
A zero energy bill would be pretty nice.
It's funny you should mention that, right? Client, passive house, zero energy. He was so excited when he got his first energy bill, he emailed it to me. $0. This house will never, ever have an energy bill. It just doesn't have one. Imagine that. Imagine telling your client when they come into your office, it's like, I know you met with a number of builders, but let me tell you what I'm going to do for you. How would you like to live in a house that never has an energy bill? There's probably a few clients out there that'd be like, yeah, I think I can get on board with that
Absolutely,
idea.
for sure. And think about our clients that are on fixed incomes too, that are retired. They're drawing Social Security, they're drawing down their retirement accounts. It's funny, even clients that have plenty of money that you wouldn't think would care about a $400 bill a month for their electricity, when you start talking about it, boy, they're really excited about it, and they do absolutely care about having a zero bill or a really low bill.
I have a client that I think he throws dinner parties so he can get the husbands over to his house so he can give a little walk and talk about his windows and lift and slide door. I really do.
That's hilarious.
So, where building science is, you're going to see me explode here in about 2 seconds. Because one of my pet peeves about where is building science is when I meet a builder or an architect that says, you know, I've been in business like 20 years, but I really want to start incorporating building science into my projects. So I have a very simple question for you. 2 2x4s, right? No magic. I put them together. Is that building science? It's a pretty simple question. I don't see anybody's heads. It's okay, you can be wrong and be embarrassed. Half the country is. Right? 2 2x4s, the minute I put them together, do I change the thermal properties of those two boards?
Yes, you do.
Do I change the drying potential of those two boards?
That's right.
So if you're a builder and you've put two 2x4s together, stop telling me you want to incorporate building science, because you are, right? Every nail you put in that house and nail boards together, you're incorporating building science. So where is building science? It's at your job site every day when you show up. Mm-hmm. Stop talking about it like it's something that we need to add or include in our projects in the future. It's there. Right? Is that building science? Of course it is. I make decisions on should it be a 16-inch on center wall or 24-inch on center wall? Should it be a 2x4? Should it be a 2x6? Should it have insulating sheathing? Should it not? Is it a vented roof or is it not? These are all building science questions that we're asking out there every day. Do I have a steel moment frame in there? Is that a problem from a thermal perspective?
And it's on an outside wall.
And it's on an outside wall. How do I solve for that problem? Right? Anybody ever seen these maps? They're out of the Building Science Home Builder's Guide. It's pretty amazing. You know, when we give talks around the country, Matt and I will ask builders, do you know where you live? And they'll say, yeah, of course. I live at, 42 Maple South Street and, down in Iowa. And it's like, no, I wasn't asking your address. Do you know where you live? Do you know what climate zone you're in? Do you know how much rainfall you get a year, right? All of this information is out there. Why do I need this information? How the hell can I build a house that battles environmental conditions if I don't know what environment I'm in?
And interestingly enough, Steve, from this conference, we had people signed up from, I think it's 47 states and 9 different countries. From our Dallas builder friends who are here, I talked to somebody from Iowa. We're representing almost all of America at this conference and 8 other countries besides the United States. Yeah. So knowing where you build and how to build differently, remember, this is Build Science 101. We're not going to get into all the nerdy details yet. We're getting there, but there's so much to know. And as a side note, just in case we run out of time, I want to make sure I remember to tell you this. Steve and I did a very short version for you all on stage today. We have a very long version that's about, 3.5 hours, Steve?
Yeah, something like that.
3.5 hours of total video time. I think it's 12 videos that are around 20-ish minutes each on our website, thebuildshow.com. It's called Build Science 101. And at the end of each short video, you can take a quiz about what you learned. So at the end, if you finish it and you get those quizzes correctly, we're going to issue you a certificate that says, yes, I finished Build Science 101. So for my builder friends out there that own companies, have your superintendents, have your project managers, have the young people on your crew. This is intended all the way down for high school age students to watch Build Science 101 on our website.
I'm going to leave you with a little bit of imagery. If you're going to Alaska in January, you're not probably packing your bikini to take on the trip, right? And if you're going to Miami in June, you certainly aren't packing your snowsuit. So think about that the next time you build a house or design it. So this is an image that I have, and it's one of one. I can never seem to find more, but it's called the rain rose. If anybody can find where this came from and if there are more and how to input, the different city, I would love that information so I can do more of them. But what it's basically showing you is that in Boston, depending on what compass direction, you might get a little bit more rain, right? And notice here, east, southeast. If we're building on the coast of Massachusetts, I'm probably getting a lot more rain than if I have a northwest exposure on a hillside in Massachusetts, right? Why does that matter? Well, if I'm going to get 4 times the amount of rain, I should probably put in 4 times the amount of thought in how I'm going to treat that house to make sure that it has the proper raincoat. Control, right? We talked about that a little earlier. This is a house that I did for a friend of mine up in, it's in Colorado. The town escapes me. It's a ski resort. I always forget the name. But anyways, Looks nice and quaint there, right? But if you understand the climate, nice and quaint is about 2 months out of the year, right? This is what the house looks like for about 7 months out of the year, right? So we have to prepare for that, right? That's why there's that corrugated metal against the house at the bottom. Yeah, it gives a nice mining building aesthetic to this Colorado house, but the reality is I got 4 feet of snow that's gonna melt at some point, turn into liquid water, and a lot of it, and I have to deal with that. And here's an astounding note. The code is actually starting to recognize building science, right? Did you know if you put a rain screen on a building, your class of vapor barrier or vapor retarder is allowed to decrease? Because if you up the drying potential of a building, guess what? The code will acknowledge it and give you a little reprieve on what you're doing. So when the code starts doing things, we definitely have to start doing things because the code corners like a freight train, right? So, enough said. You guys got me rolling here. Yeah, if you have mushrooms growing out of your siding, you probably have a problem.
That's a good quote to quote Steve on. I think you should all write that down. If you have mushrooms on your siding, there's a problem there.
If there's mold behind the poly, you probably have a problem. If you have liquid water behind the poly, you probably have a problem.
Yes, you do.
Right? The funny thing about building science is there's not a whole lot of leeway. When you screw up, you screw up, and Mother Nature lets you know. So how do we get there? Well, the first thing is we talked about gaining control. Well, we have to understand that language. We have to understand how to implement this stuff. And you as a builder, you need to understand how to interpret those fine drawings.
Yep.
Oh, by the way, on this building here, the next slide. So this was a passive house, 14-inch floor truss insulated on the outside of the building. But notice, water is key. So rather than the solution, I asked the question, where will the water go? If water gets into this wall, what happens? Well, it falls to gravity. I need an outlet. 3/16 airspace, brass screen, open deck. It'll leach the water out. Now, some of you are probably sitting there and saying, Steve, why would you build this 14-inch insulated wall on the outside and then put holes in it? Why? Because water is the #1 killer of buildings. If it don't last, it don't matter, right? So, as a side note, understand this area here, well, yes, I'm letting a little bit of air come in there and it will create a little cold pocket there, but also understand across this assembly, I'm at probably R130. So I can give up a little bit there and it can be a little cool on the outside.
And then, by the way, this is a really cold climate.
Yeah, and then there's just a shot of what the bottom of that outrigger truss, Larson truss, looks like. As we move up the wall, again, water, air, thermal, and vapor. It's about gaining control. It's that simple, right? Yeah, you know, I was skeptical as the first time, so I ran my 160-pound frame up there. I did a little jig. That's a joke, people. Wake up. I'm 185.
Not a pound over.
This is one of my favorite questions. What's the best material for whatever situation? What's the answer, Matt?
Good question, Steve. What is the best material?
The one installed right. Right? If you see Joe out there, you ask him a question. Joe, you ever investigated a building that was successful?
There he is.
There you go. There you go. But the reality is materials very rarely fail. Execution and installation.
100%.
right? That's what I'm getting at there.
And that's why we're so excited to have you guys in the audience learning this, because it's our smart brains that need to direct the show and make sure things get done correctly on the job site.
Yeah.
You can specify all the great materials in the world, but if you don't have men and women that are installing them correctly, that makes the big difference. And as a side note, I want to say all the guys that built this stage, by the way, are over there on my left, your right. Thank you, gentlemen, for all your hard work getting ready for Build Show Live. A couple of those guys worked till midnight more than one day this week getting these stages ready with this beautiful Delta Millworks wood.
Right. But, you know, people always ask, well, what's the right material for this? Or, you know, what's the right vapor barrier? But the reality is that all materials have some level of permeability. They all have some level of thermal resistance. Some suck at it, some are really good at it. But the reality is they are all incorporated into the control layers. In fact, glass is all 4 control layers, right? It's dealing with our water, it's dealing with our air, it has a vapor profile, as well as it has some thermal resistance, or in case of windows, a U value. Right? Everything's a control layer. The question is the magnitude that they operate at. Right? Some things are good at keeping water out, some things suck at it. You know, you brought up a really good point. The whole idea of you all joining us here and us up here is that you're not going to leave here with solutions. I want you to leave here with the right questions to start asking and the right thoughts to be thinking, right? So we're not here to get solutions or get Steve's details. We're here to just start questioning things. And why do we do the things we do? And what's the right material for the right situation? What's the problem I'm trying to solve? That's what we need to do.
Steve, we got to wrap up here pretty soon because I got to get to another presentation here in a minute.
You got it, buddy. So control layers, they're everywhere, right? Innovation, it's a process, not a product. You know, I'll leave you with, every time you build a house, that next house should be a little bit better than the last one you built.
That's for sure.
Because you should have learned something, right? This is a house I did with Jake. We have a shaft that runs through, a basement shaft that handles all of our mechanicals in that house. Yes, that's not a missile silo, that's actually the basement. And it's coupled with a turn-down slab. So we get the efficiency of a turn-down slab, but we get the use and utilization of a basement. Water management, you know, one of the things that we did in 101 was break down the 4 control layers to 3 simple words, right? Protection, mitigation, and prevention. Go watch 101. We elaborate on those.
Yep.
Right? Ground certainly has water in it, no doubt. Protection, put a roof on it. Right? If you have a high wall, put a bigger roof on it. Groundwater, you need to manage it just like you're managing the water off the roof. Rain screens, mitigation, give it a place to go. It's called water management, not water stoppage. Give it a place to go. Open joint versus closed joint. Doesn't really matter, whatever fits the aesthetic. Just understand that the execution and the intention need to sync up. We talked about prevention. At some point, we have the house and it's done, right? Everything else we're gonna do, we're gonna add to that. How do you know? Put a hose on it. Test the windows. Find out for yourself if you guys are doing a good job. Air barrier, continuity, separation, and escalation. The one I'd probably want to highlight is separation. It's pretty easy. Remember that Houston house? You're either outside or you're inside. It's that simple, people. There's no gray area. You're one or the other. Your HVAC system's either in the house or it's outside the house. There's no kind of or so-so. Right? Are you familiar with checklists? Yeah, I hate them. So I did a graphic of the Energy Star checklist. These are all the areas in which your house has the potential to air leak. Inside or outside? We're closing in on it.
Yeah.
All right? Yeah, understanding, are you inside or outside? This builder tried to tell me that he had a good air barrier. And I simply said, if I could see daylight through the framing, chances are your air barrier isn't as complete as you think it is. All right? I talked about this house yesterday. The window order failed to come, so we built a complete zip box and we tested it. 0.16.
That's
ACH
tight.
50.
That was real tight.
It works. Go check them out. They got their trailer right there. They'll answer all your questions. It's not hard, people. It's not hard to get below 1. These are a series of houses, just some of the ones that we've done in the office. These are, in fact, all certified passive houses, too. And every one of them is a zero energy house. Jake's house, this is his personal house that I designed, he built. We had air barrier come in. If you need some help getting that air tightness level, we have solutions for that too. These guys can come in and do some air barrier. This one here, I always put this up and I say, hey, why do you think I put that up? Well, I work with a builder that does such a good job. He uses a duct blaster, not a blower door, to measure his air leakage.
I'd also like to point out that Jake owns that blower door. He was the first builder that I knew that had owned his own rather than relying on a testing company to spend $500 or $600 or $700 to come. There's 2 blower door companies here at a builder conference because I think that builders who want to get better need to own their own door and have somebody on their staff trained.
You know, Coda Ueno, who is at Building Science, is going to be here. He's giving a talk, but I love one of Coda's quotes, right? Numbers without data is just an opinion. If you want to know if you build a good house, get a blower door and test it. And when you get a good number, then you can stand up and say, I build a good house.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Right? Vapor management, uniformity, perspective, and rate. All right? Vapor, treat it as an asset or a liability. So many people are afraid of it, but the real question you should be asking is, does my wall have the potential to dry out? Now, where's the vapor barrier? Everybody jumps to that right away. Talk about the wall, look at the vapor profile. Does the wall have the ability to dry? Mm-hmm. Can I use the ability to dry as an asset? Stop thinking of this big bad vapor monster that's coming to eat your house, right? And we can do special conditions. This is a pool house that operates at probably 80 degrees and 80+% RH, and it operates at that successfully. It is such a horrible space. When I walk in, I can spend about 3 or 4 minutes in there. But the homeowner, I love this space. Like, he loves it. He loves operating. It's like, Tim, whatever makes you happy. But we might have to have some details. Even though we're in climate zone 5, we have to have some slightly different details because we're creating a condition that's opposite of what we're normally fighting. All right?
Steve, we got to wrap this up because I got to give a talk at Extreme Panel in 5 minutes.
We got 5 minutes, buddy.
Okay, we got 5 minutes, everybody.
I know. Zender, they're here. Go check them out. Integration versus application, like I said, go watch it. Thermal management are 3 words associated.
It was hard to condense 4 hours into 30 minutes.
Yeah. I wrote in a great article for JLC that talks about whole wall R value versus center of cavity. Trying to get to some interesting builder's field guide. You know, the images that come out of there, just exceptional. This was the only foam failure that we've ever had, and it was because the substrate was very, very cold. Continuity, one of my favorite words. Some details here. You'll see these in some other presentations too. Pocket headers. We don't want to make sure Matt isn't late. And Matt, you had the...
It's my favorite quote from you, Steve. I heard this many, many years before we were friends really ago. It's not that high performance houses cost too much. It's that our idea of a fairly priced new home is based on a history of building houses that meet embarrassingly low performance benchmarks. Steve Baczek quoted that many, many years ago, and I love that, Steve. I mean, that's the whole point of this conference, is this crowd that's here is very like-minded. We want to learn, we want to know better, and we want to build better. So guys, I really appreciate y'all coming to the conference. I'm headed right next door to Extreme Panel, where Perry and I are going to answer all the big questions about what and why and how on SIPs. Steve, what's your next presentation?
Cam, what are we doing, buddy? I got Cam, my man.
Cam's going to tell you our next presentation with Steve. And we've got 130 manufacturers here that are going to want to get to know you. So please, you guys go out, say hi to all these folks, get the tour. Make sure you get a card from someone you talk to, so if you have questions later, or maybe you're not going to use a Zender on this job, but you might in 6 months, grab their business card so you can follow up with them if you've got questions in the future. Thanks for coming, everybody. I really appreciate you guys and your support at our first inaugural Build Show Live. Nice job, Steve. Well done.